As Grant said, I'm an engineer. I was, as of a couple weeks ago, was working at a company called Near AI. It's a startup building AI agent infrastructure. But as of recently, I'm going to be transitioning to Shopify in a couple weeks. So I'm going to speak just briefly about browser agents and using them and just my personal experience with them. They've been kind of my obsession for like the past half a year, and just building a bunch of them locally. And the things that I'm just going to talk about things that I've been using them for, what has worked and what hasn't worked, and hopefully you can take away some lessons from that. So I just want to start with just the general definition, my personal definition of an agent. It's extremely overloaded term, but just for the sake of the next 30 minutes, I like just thinking of it like this diagram. From, if any of you haven't read, Anthropic has this amazing blog post called Building Effective Agents. And they have this one picture here that basically describes an agent as just an LLM in a for loop with some conditional logic. And I think that's like the nice, simplest, and like pretty precise like definition functionally of what an agent is. And when thinking of browser agents, effectively don't think of environment as just environment, just think of it as just the browser. Having an LLM do some specific action in a browser, like navigating to certain tabs, clicking on certain things to accomplish whatever goal that you prompt it to do. And there are a lot of companies and a lot of projects that integrate with the browser and try to call themselves agentic browsing. I'll talk about a few of them. And I'm going to talk about the ones that I've used and the scenario that I care about. This worked for me. In terms of some of the products, one product that I think is actually amazing is this thing called Stagehand from a company called BrowserBase, not an ad. Effectively, BrowserBase's business is running a virtualized browser in the cloud that they'll give you an MCP server as well to talk with it and give you access to the special tool, another special MCP server called, well, they'll give you access to an MCP server with one special tool called Stagehand, which allows you to like describe an action in text, and a little sub agent will spawn and do something. I think it's an amazing product. The only thing is they definitely want to vendor lock you in the browser-based product. While if you're a developer with like a little bit of like ChatGPT foo, you can run Playwright and some browsers locally, but browser-based is an option. I think it's a really good product. Another one is called Browser Use, which kind of does like the similar thing, but gives you also like a nicer SDK to talk with. I personally don't like it as much because I think there's like a lot of boilerplate code that they force you to write. Like example, literally the Playwright integration they have on their site, if I can click it, maybe. They give you, it's a lot of boilerplate code. No, it is, there we go. So like writing all of, like copying and pasting like this like several hundred lines of code to do something like I think as simple as launching a browser is like really extra. And like what I'm going to show is you can do this in like way less systems integration. Another tool I wanted to mention was just in Claude desktop itself. There's like this default Chrome tool. I actually personally don't recommend this tool because they only give you these 10 tools. And in my experience using it, like the real art and the real je ne sais quoi of MCP is like exposing the right tools to an LLM in order not to like simplify something, but also not over complexify a certain tool, but to try and how do you make that right interface in an MCP server so that the LLM can take most advantage of it. And personally, I believe that in this control Chrome, these 10 tools are like not sufficient. So like an example is in the use case I'm going to describe is I really wanted to rely on screenshotting, and there's no tool that'll ever be able to really get me to do this built into this MCP server. And having an LLM, if I want to force the LLM to figure out how to screenshot the browser, it's going to go through a bunch of loops and other steps that may cause it to fail or may cause it to like death spiral. I'm sure everybody's experienced an agent death spiraling into just some loop that doesn't get it to accomplish anything. The more complexity or too much simplicity, you kind of cause more the likelihood of death spiraling to like increase. So finding that magic zone is more of an art than I guess a science. Another amazing tool is just in ChatGPT, like agent mode. Like running a browser here and doing an action is honestly a pretty great experience. However, like I'll mention the use case now that I care about is I run a few personal websites on the side, and one thing that like always like bugs me is anytime I make a change, I always go through the user experience, like right before I deploy, just making sure that I didn't break anything, right? And that's an extremely manual process, this like quality assurance user testing that I would like to automate. And I kind of saw browser use as like, this is the chance to automate that. But before I get there, what? Yeah. Before I get there, like the reason why I wouldn't use the agent in ChatGPT is like I personally believe in like I lean on the side of like owning my own infrastructure, and there's certain like tests that I actually wouldn't be able to do in ChatGPT's like agent. Like I'd want to set up certain infrastructure and give access to certain like mocked APIs and, to my user tester, which is the agent, that I wouldn't really be able to get, or it'd be very complicated to set up with this. But if you just want to test simple workflows, probably use ChatGPT agent. It's really a great system. But the one that I'm going to use and talk about a little bit more is this MCP server from Microsoft called Playwright MCP. It exposes, I believe, a great set of tools. It's open source, so you can read it. Relies on Playwright, which is also open source, so you can kind of see everything you're running and have knowledge of everything you're running, like top to bottom. And now I'll get into like the actual use case of quality assurance and user testing. So I know a lot of people in the audience are engineers, and there's definitely a spectrum of how people align themselves with testing their product. Some people rely on the no testing, just vibes, and they just say, I tested it myself. I clicked it. And for some companies, that works. Some products, that works for them. Whatever's all the power to you. On the completely other side, they say, no, 100% test coverage, end to end. I need to mock out everything. But the issue with that sort of line of logic is in order to have like a perfect testing suite, you must first simulate the universe, which is like totally not feasible. And even if you have 100% testing coverage, there could still be something that goes wrong in production because the stars aligned in that way and caused a random quantum like radioactive ray to cause something to fail that you would never be able to simulate. So kind of like in the middle, where I think is like a nice place to lie, is actually, specifically this only applies to products that have like a website and work in the browser. That's all I'm going to be talking about today in this constrained universe. This idea that what if you were just to have an agent given a nice prompt and a good browser like MCP server, just say, I want you to go to the site, do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. You should see this, and then report true or false. Yes, this thing happened. Something like that. A nice end-to-end test where you didn't have to code up the full logic end-to-end yourself, which most engineering teams do. Instead, you just write it in a prompt and have an agent sort of roughly try and figure it out. It's not a perfect system, though. Like as we all know, like LLMs and agents are extremely fuzzy. Again, hence death spirals. They happen. But there's a certain amount of like, these agentic systems that do multiple steps have gotten to a level of quality where if you have a very directed workflow and are very clear about the exact actions you want to perform, or maybe with a little bit of room, give or take, you can get, I believe, like for me personally, a high level of fidelity. So I'm going to show a few videos of just the stuff that I've been doing. So one of my side sites is I made a daily word game that I'm actually also going to speed this up because browser agents are slow. FYI, they're going to be churning through a lot of tokens. So in this example, I have this one side site that's like a daily word game, where your goal is, I'll fast forward a little bit in this little stream. Your goal is to find a path of words in semantic space in order to get to some objective. And you slowly build your word chain to get to this word. And your goal is to find it. So something I wanted to be sure of is anytime a new game comes out, I want to be sure it's actually playable and it's actually enjoyable. So I thought it's a nice quality assurance user testing. I'm just going to have an AI agent at the strike of midnight, like play the game and just run it once, maybe run it a few times. How many of these agent rollouts passed and we were able to win the game? How many weren't? And just try and get a rough gauge of how difficult it is. It's a small test, costs a few bucks, but it gives me like a nice litmus test when I can wake up in the morning just to see like oh, if I ran 10 agents and all of them failed on this one, I should probably look at that game and try and understand why it was difficult. Again, it's not a perfect test, but it's like a good litmus test to sort of like simulate user testing in a way. They're not real humans, but they're agents. And I'm running this. I'm going to run the, yeah, did I run this on 2x speed? I did. I'm going to, anyway, this video is just it stepping. Oh, I should also mention what you're actually looking at. On the left, I'm running Claude Code. I presume a lot of people are familiar with Claude Code. For those who aren't, it's a TUI-like interface where you can talk to Anthropic or a few other models and be able to agentically execute a few actions, hook up MCP servers. Think of it like ChatGPT in the terminal, effectively. And on the right is my actual game that I'm running. And the one main MCP server that I hook up to Claude Code is Playwright. So I just say as my first message, launch a Playwright browser. And then I give it this long prompt saying, here's the exact order of execution things that I want you to do. Go to the website, play the game with the attempt to win. And when you get to the victory screen, take a screenshot and record some stats and stuff like this. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit because it is like a while. Eventually, if I fast forward a little bit, eventually the agent kind of gets there. It took a little bit of words, but when it's done, it'll send a screenshot, give me some additional stats about how long it took, and then I know that this game is relatively playable, effectively. And that helps me. If I run this once a day, again, that great litmus test. But games are nice. There's actually a better scenario that I think is more relevant for businesses, is like if you have a product that's like changing many, many times a day and you're doing many, many deploys a day, something could be wrong and you don't even know it. So this is kind of where the importance of having like user testing and QA is like really important. You spend a lot of money on teams, and sometimes even QA teams might not be able to catch certain things. Users will probably find something, and they'll always let you know. And it's always better to have your own internal testers find a problem than have your users find it. So one example of this is I have another website that I run called Tarot Reader AI. It's effectively AI fortune telling. And I started to integrate into my testing suite after every time I make a deploy to production, I run about like 10 of these like parallel agents doing browser use, all trying to accomplish very specific goals. So this is one of the goals. It's only a minute and a half. I'll speed it up. Very simply, one of the products that's offered on the website are follow-up questions that you can ask the agent and try and get more insight into your actual reading. And the very simple thing I wanted to test is anytime I make a deploy, a user should be able to buy credits at any point. And if a user cannot buy, then that's a problem for the business. You know what I mean? So you should always try and have that sort of test. And again, this is very naive, very simple, but it would actually be pretty sophisticated to actually manually code out versus browser, like agentic loop, mush together, run it after every deploy, cost a few pennies to run. And it's been super invaluable because I've definitely caught like a few problems trying to run new deploys. That was mostly the main things that I kind of wanted to show. I believe this workflow is great. Like there's also like Claude Code has an SDK attached to it. If I can even find a little gist here. If you want this gist, I can send it to you of just a simple example. It's like literally like not that many lines of code to do like 44 lines of code in order to do one of these end-to-end like tests effectively. It's extremely powerful, and if you're running engineering products, I'd highly recommend. And here, as an example, when I take questions right now, while people ask questions, I'm going to have it play Wordle in the background. All right. Yeah. Any questions about that work? The whole idea? No questions. I did a perfect presentation. All the information was perfectly injected into everybody's brains.
Well, so my question is, as you mentioned, it gets Claude and the AI models can get really fuzzy when it comes to troubleshooting issues. Wouldn't it be better to use some sort of combination of having it write out a more detailed test that's hard-coded, and then using LML, the AI model for the more dynamic parts of the website?
Repeat that one more time?
Wouldn't it be more effective to maybe have like a half and half solution where you hard code part of the test?
Yeah,
You know,
I think that's actually like there's one of the products that I just mentioned, Stagehand, actually like has the intention of you doing that. Yeah, there'll definitely be a world where it's mixed somewhere. Like you might have a fixture that you might need to set up for a test, and like, yeah, I can totally see a hybrid world. The case that I really care about is just like run this test on my production site that's like running full time. But yeah, if you want to do that before you actually push to production, then absolutely setting up fixtures and all that kind of stuff. Kind of like an example in this SDK, if I can actually find it. They give, in at least this product stagehand, they give a good example. Let me quickly try and find it. I'll find you offline and I'll send it to you. I don't want to spend all the time searching up here, but yes, I agree.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah. Hi, Alex.
Hey.
Quick question. So I know that previously you built browser agents before MCP servers.
Yeah.
So my question is, what was the experience like using this versus then when you were doing it without MCP?
So yeah, I did a hackathon in Miami, like probably a year ago, and I kind of was doing exactly this with browser agents, and just the death spirals were way more likely back then, and also context engineering was like really tricky to like lay out. Like the contexts weren't like long enough in order to fit entire websites like in there, and also finding clickable elements is like a pretty complex like engineering task in order to find not only clickable elements but finding things in iframes and all these weird edge cases. Luckily, Microsoft did a lot of that work for me in their MCP server that I don't really have to worry about that. So it's mostly just like waiting for better tools to emerge. That's kind of over the past year. For reference, this hackathon I did, the main project was you have your microphone, you say, go to google.com, and then translate that in single intent into an exact action. And that worked, but for doing multi-step, it would doom spiral like way too often. So mostly just like the agentic like loop has gotten just like way more reliable, and there's just better open source tools.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And with respect to the context window, you were mentioning that you're using Playwright MCP server, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Does it still capture, I remember when you built something before, does it capture pretty much all the code, let's say like in the inspector as well, still today? Or does it segment
I don't know
the code?
if it collects everything that's like everything that's produced by in the console.
Right.
Effectively in the inspector. I don't know. I'd have to check, but I think there's a tool in order to get all that. There are still issues with like Playwright MCP is it produces a lot of text.
Right.
So like you'll get a lot of data. Luckily in tools like Claude Code, there's this one feature that I think is instrumental that they've made, which is like context compression. So when you're reaching like 80% of your context window, you'll Claude Code will go through this process of trying to shrink it back down to 40% and just try and eliminate redundant things, summarize, and do all that. Great feature.
Yeah, that is a great
And Claude
feature.
Code isn't the only game in town. You can use things like OpenCode or roll your own agentic loop. Like I spoke with like Grant at a previous event. You can kind of reconstruct an agentic loop in like a couple hundred lines of Python code. It might be a little bit more naive than some of these more mature projects like Claude Code, but in most cases it can get simple jobs done.
Nice. And one last question, I promise. With respect to cost, you mentioned that, for example, with TerraReader, it was like a couple pennies, but for like, let's say a production of maybe enterprise size, I mean,
It depends on how many tests, like there's obviously like a budget.
Yeah.
Anybody that's using LLMs in their product and like
Right.
exposing that to customer, like is thinking about like the cost of tokens and all this.
Yeah.
For like my use case where I run this like I don't run this like on demand and for a customer. I run this like internally, like for myself, where I have complete control over the costs and I can control when I want to spend and when not. Every test is like less than $1. It's still a lot of tokens.
Right.
$1 is still a lot of tokens. Like just be honest, but I'm willing to eat that cost in order to make sure that the product is reliable.
Absolutely. I mean, just one sale, right, is equal to
many tests.
tests, right? So it's fantastic. All right. Any other questions?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. What best practices have you seen out there for guardrailing? So to give you some context, I'm building a number of automations for the insurance industry, which is very regulated and very sensitive. So we've experimented with a number of AI agent solutions, but often they go rogue, which is a big no-no. Like for example, accidentally canceling someone's policy. So have you seen any best practices out there that allow you to put some guardrails in place?
You can obviously roll your own. I'm going to be a little bit like shameless. I have a friend who's the founder of a company called PromptFoo that like specializes in this and like red teaming LLMs. Their product is incredible. Look up PromptFoo.
PromptFoo. Okay.
Yeah, it's very good.
Perfect.
That's
Okay.
what I recommend.
Thanks.
If that's it, like, thanks everybody.